we're going to start Lamed Beis. Correct? Lamed Beis by the Mishnah. That's relevant. In Peichsenes Aner mit Meshvois Akeli. You can't, according to Rashi, this is like a piece of. You can't press into the clay to make a vessel. Well, you're pressing in because you would then be able to put oil in it and light a wick. But this is a vessel. Now, usually a vessel is made by molding the clay and then putting it into the oven. Here, he's not putting it into the oven, so it's a very cheap. This is like a disposable keli because you can use you can mold it into something else, but afterwards it's not really recyclable. You're also not allowed to make charcoal on Yom Tov. Now, charcoal is wood that was put out before it was put out the fire before it's burned. But the charcoal was used usually by the blacksmiths or something to make the fire hot. You're not allowed to do this. This is a tool for the blacksmith. You're also not allowed to cut a wick. That's the problem with cutting a wick. Let's see. This is also the wick is also like a keli, like a tool. You can't make wicks. What are you supposed to do? How did they do them? Make wicks in Yom Tov? What did they do? I mean, they must have had some cotton, and they weren't allowed to cut it. You can cut it with a fire. It gets cut in the middle. You light it in the middle, it gets cut. Okay, let's see the Gemara. Mantana de Prisas Ner Manahu. This is one that says that hollowing out this glob of clay is actually a vessel. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, we're jumping generations here. Usually it doesn't start with the Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is in the second and third generation. Rav Meir, he says, we're following the opinion of Rav Meir. The Tanya, because it was taught in a Beitza Daf. There's a whole Masechtas Kelim that discusses at what point is something makabel tumah. Susceptible to impurity, it has to be a utensil. So there's a Beitza that says, what about an earthenware keli? When is it susceptible to tumah? So Rav Meir says, Mishanigmar malachta. Once the molding of it is done, it's susceptible to Rav Meir. Rabbi Yeshua or Mishi Yitzar for Bekivsha? No, only after it's put into the kiln. That's when it's going to be considered a keli. Okay, we have a good source. So here, our Mishnah would follow Reb Meir that says once it's molded. Amalei Abaya. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't have known, but Rashi tells me Shnigma Malachta means Chaki Kasam.
We say it's impure, it's like when
that's when, if it touches something that's impure, it will contract the burn. Before that, you see, just a piece of dirt is not going to become permanent. It has to be a utensil to become permanent. So when is it considered a utensil? Because you're taking raw material, you're turning it into a utensil. At what point does it go from raw material to a utensil? So Mishnah Malachta doesn't mean when it's put into the kiln. Yeah, if Rabbi Yeshua didn't say anything, then I would have thought Nigmar Malachta meant the kiln. But because I have the contrast. So Amalei Abaya says to his teacher Rabbi Yosef, Mimai, how do you know that that's really a source from our Mishnah? See, over there it's dealing with the clay cheres. It's probably a large earthenware vessel. Here we're dealing with something that has like a thumbprint in it, but here you're just dealing with a little lamp that just needs to hold a little oil, the Bachim Yeshiva, they don't have any layers. which get all types of creative beer bottles. You fill it up with water. You take anything and you put a wick in it, and so here it's this tiny thing. Over there by the keli, maybe I can't put liquid in it because I didn't put it in the kiln yet. But I can still use it to hold, I don't know, some other things, some straw, or some papers. It still has a shape that could be used as a container. Maybe I can't use it for, for food, but it still is a container. Over here, what can you use a thumbprint in a piece of clay? So maybe Reb Meir would not say that this is considered a keli. That's Abaya's question. How do you know you really have a source? What can you do with this thumbprint in a mold, in a glob of clay? And I says, well, look at the sheet. You can put some small coins in it, and that would already be considered a keli. You can use it for something. Everyone has a dish in the house and they put in like little things that they don't know where they've gone. A screw from somewhere that fell out from somewhere. It could Amri. Those that say Omar of Yosef gave a different author or a different opinion. It's Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik. It's not Rabbi Meir, it's Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik. Okay, Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik was a son of Tzaddik, one of Pastor for years. Also a Tana. So the Tananas we have in the Mishnah, it says Ilpesin Charnius. Tahiris Ba'il Ames. It's Masazov. That's the Tanakama's opinion. We'll say what that is in a minute. And Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik after Tahiris Masazov, Yishlein Egel after. Well, an ilfis is a pot. Now, Charnius, Rashi says that these are pots that are not put into the kiln. It's just these people that don't care to have their pots heated, and that they have them finished. They're ready to eat their meat on these pots that are still mud-like. Now, Tosfos doesn't say that. Tosfos says that it's some sort of keli that's made with the lid on it, and then somehow afterwards you have to break the lid off. But it's basically sealed. Okay, let's take what's going on here. So the Tanakama says that these ilpas and charnius, whatever they are tahiris ba'il. Why are they tahiris ba'il? Ba'il is a room or a roof under a roof that has a corpse. So according to Rashi, it's tahor because it doesn't really have the real indent. It's a plate. Okay. And according to Tosfos, it's sealed. And the only thing that earthenware is only tamei if you go inside it, if it has an opening. Here it doesn't have an opening because it's sealed, at least at the beginning when it's made. So that's why it's tahiris ba'il. However, tameis b'masa hazav. The zav is someone that's tamei because he had a mission, but not a regular mission, something abnormal. And what he can make tamei doesn't need to have be that same sort of receptacle. He could make something tamei through moving. It doesn't have to go inside. Has it when he moves it. So when he moves it, it's considered everything moves. It's just as if it's been inside. So according to Tosfos, we understand why it's tamei. According to Rashi, why should it be tamei? Azar will make a keli. Yeah, if he touches a keli. So because it's used as is, so it's considered a keli regarding regarding a Zav because it's used like this plate that you can eat on. But when it comes to Tuma, it needs to have a receptacle. Okay. Beitza Tzaddik Eimer after here's the Zav. It's also not tame from the Zav. It's not considered a keli for the Zav either. Nigmar Malachtan because it's not complete. What does Nigmar Malachtan over here mean? Because even the carving isn't complete. Even the molding of it isn't complete. If the molding of it would have been complete, then even though it wasn't put into the kiln, you see there's a diuk here that tells me what he holds. Because the molding wasn't complete. But if the molding would have been complete, even before it was put into the kiln, it would already be tummy. You see, Rabbi Elazar Tzaddik holds that a klicheres is tummy before it's put into the kiln. That would be for kashrus. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. If you put something that's tummy back into the kiln, does it become a new vessel? I think the only way the tummy goes off klicheres is broken. Yeah, not sure.
Tuma being used as a proxy for when.
No. There's a comparison. You're not allowed to make a keli anyhow. Right. In that discussion, we use tuma to compare it to hilchos yom tov. Is it a keli for tuma? Then it's a problem to create it on yom tov.
So, if it becomes a keli, or if it can, but
Yeah.
then it becomes a keli
on yom tov, which makes it an issue to do that. Yeah, an issue to do that on yom tov. Noilad or Masak and Mona creating a keli. Right. Okay. Amalei Abaya has the same question. I'm sorry, the sound isn't good. You hear me now?
I hear you, but it's very I don't know, staticky, and then also like a terrible echo.
Does that help? Is that any better?
You talking?
Okay. Okay. So Abai asked the same question to that he asked Rabbi Yosef before. He says, "Dilma atkan lekam Rabbi Elazar Beitza Daf al dechazi lekabuli beimidi, aval hachal my chazi." He says maybe Rabbi Elazar Beitza was saying that it would be a completed vessel with those large pots or those plates that it could be used for something. But what is this tiny thing going to be used for before it's put into the kiln? And he answers lekabuli beipshiti, that it could be used to fit small coins. A little dish or something. Okay. Tanar Rabbanan. We have a brisa. In Peisin Asaner, you can't hollow out this candle. You can't make these ilfesin, these pots. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel mater the ilfesin charnias. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel does allow it to make these pots. See here, what we did was we put the Mishnah that discussed the pots into hilchos yom tov. Right, combined. So, but in this Mishnah, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel allows you to do this. Now, my charnias, the Gemara asks, what are charnias? I'm Rabbi Yehuda irnias. Oh, very nice. Irnias. My irnias, what are irnias? I'm Rabaya ti chaklaisa. These are plates from the field. Yeah. Well, I think what it means is that these are people that use kalim that aren't really presentable to anyone else. Yeah, it's like when you're out. Yeah. what to use when you don't have anything else. A paper bag. Okay, you're not allowed to make charcoal. Umar says, what do you do with charcoal? You can't use charcoal. What do you do with charcoal on Yom Tov? I mean, if you're making a fire, so make a fire. But charcoal is not necessary unless you're doing, unless you're smelting some metal things or something. So Tani no, actually they need charcoal because the bathhouse attendants want to heat the water very hot, and they use charcoal. For on Yom Tov, which says, well, now you're entering into a problem, you're getting into trouble. Are you allowed to heat the bathhouse on Yom Tov? That's a problem. There's a gezerah that heat up the bathhouse. You know, they would have tubs that they would heat it from the bottom. It says Kadama Rabba Lazia. We're talking about, you said there were stages in forbidding the bathhouse. We learned this we're in Shabbos, whatever. The bathhouse attendants were not trusted, and they would actually make the fire and heat the water on Shabbos. And so they forbade using the bathhouse, but they still allowed at a certain point that you can go in there, not to go into the water, but you can go into the steam, to schwitz. And but then they saw that people were going in and for schwitzing, and they weren't really, and so they made it the cave and everything. But so Rava says lahazia v'koydin gezerah, hachnam lahazia v'koydin gezerah. Like Rava said, that it was at a time. This Mishnah was said at a time when you were allowed to go in to sweat. It was because it was before the decree of that you can't even go in a bathhouse to sweat. Okay, that we mentioned before that on Yom Tov. We had a taste this. It seemed to imply that the reason why you can't bathe on Yom Tov was because, remember that? It wasn't so common. Would that then allow us to bathe today? Possibly yes. Yes, you're up. Possibly yes. Yeah, we had it on the Kabbalah. But the bathhouse may be worse because there's a special decree against the bathhouse. So even if you would be allowed to take a shower on Yom Tov, that doesn't mean you can take a shower in the mikveh. Follow? The bathhouse has its own decree. Yeah. So you can't cut the wick into two. What's the difference? By the knife, it says that you can't cut it with the knife. The kamasakin mana, because you're fixing a vessel, which means that you're making a wick, and not a vessel, it's a receptacle, but it's a tool that's used, or a keli. But kamasakin mana, what's the difference if you use a fire? You're also, the end result is the same. So Tani Rab Chia, what you do is you take the wick and you put it into two lamps, and then you light it in the center. Now you have two lamps that are lit. So it's not clear that you just split a wick in half. It looks like you just lit two lamps. So because it's not clear that you just made a keli, it looks like you just did a lighting of two lamps quickly. So that's mutter. Okay. Amar Rav Nosson Baraba Amar Rav. Rav Nosson Baraba says the name of Rav. He's not very common, Rav Nosson Baraba. We know Rav students, Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda and Rav Gidl, Rav Chia Barashi, the students of Rav. Rav Nosson Baraba is not so common. Now, because of that, later on we're going to have in this Gemara other sayings from Rav Nosson Baraba, because he's mentioned. So I'm going to say, what else do we have from him? Here he says, Moichtin es hapsila b'yom tov. There's a little bit of charcoal at the edge of the wick. You're allowed to take that off on Yom Tov. Someone to learn Moichtin means you take it off with a needle, like a matzah. I'm sorry, the Gemara asks straight away. My Moichtin, what does it mean, Moichtin? Amar Rav Chinna bar Shalmei, possibly Mishmei Derav. Yeah, to remove the darkness. It's the dark part of the wick. And Turns out that actually makes, when you remove that, it gets brighter. So it's called, to take away the darkness means to make the wick brighter, make the candle brighter. I don't know how. Yeah. Yeah. Hani bar kapara taught. Vav dvarim nemru b'psila. We have 6 things that were said about a wick. Gimel, a wick on Yom Tov. Gimel lahachmer, gimel lahakal. Divided in half. 3 of them are things that you're not allowed to do, and 3 of them are things that you are allowed to do. So lahachmer, we start with the strict one. In goydle naisa lachatchila b'Yom Tov, you can't braid a wick on Yom Tov. Rein mahavim maisa ba'ar, you can't scorch it. What would that mean? To light it and then to put it out.
When you say lahachmer, often that means it's permitted to work spoons if not, but if you did it like
Right.
that opens up the other nothing.
Right.
This is the usher.
You're right. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like it's all rabbinic. And ve'ein chaytzanes l'shnayim, and you can't cut it into 2. Like we said, with the knife, you can't cut it. Lahakel, what are the leniencies? Nemacha biyad, you can, I guess, squish it with your fingers. B'sheir b'shemen, and you can soak it in oil. Okay, maybe there's a problem with making material wet. But here we say it's allowed. And you're allowed to cut the wick. Once you put it into 2 candle holders, you cut it by lighting the center of it. Okay. That was a brisa from Bar Kapara. Now we go back to Reb Nosson bar Abba that told us before about Moichten. So here we're going to have some other statements from him, not relevant to anything that we're discussing, just because Reb Nosson bar Abba, at least on the surface. The wealthy of Bavel are going down to Gehenna. Kihad the Shabsai bar Marinus, like Shabsai, the son of Marinus. Marinus may be like Marius or another possibility. Marinus also may be some sort of water, sea, marine. Iklal Bavel. He went down to Bavel, the Shabsai bar Marinus, and Vaiminayu Iska. He asked, he said, I'll do the work, lend me money, and I'll give you half the profits, which that's Iska. That's that's how business is. One person gives some money, the other one does the work and gets some interest. But they do it in a way where they own it, so it's not shouldn't be ribbis. No one wanted to help him. So he asked for food. Namilazinu. He didn't give him any food. Amar Hani me Erev Rav Kasu. Says these must be from the Erev Rav. They're not really of Jewish lineage. The Ksiv v'nasan l'charachmem b'richamcha. This is that Hashem will give you compassion, and He will be compassionate on you. That means not that He will be compassionate on you, but He will make you compassionate. Anyone that's compassionate over on creations, on people, then he's a descendant of Avram. But if he's not compassionate, he's not a descendant of Avram. Yeah, what happened by Shaul? Remember the Gevinim and Nesim? Yeah, what happened was they killed Noi Yerakayim, and then the Nesim or the Gevinim, they lost their jobs. They were the wood choppers, water carriers, and they didn't have any jobs. So when there was a big plague, they asked them, they asked, what did we do wrong? They said he didn't help. He killed out the city, then these people lost their jobs. So they went to ask for forgiveness. They said, we'll only forgive you if Shaul's children die. No, they don't gain anything from that. They
is harm. That's not they don't get income. So the Gemara says that if they don't have Rahmanas, they're Achzari, they must not be. That's not a Jewish characteristic. Okay, V'amar Rav Nosson Barabba Marav Kol Mitzah. Back the other way. Yeah. So the way they'll respond back is that he's really doing it for himself. Right. Okay. Another statement from Rav Nosson Barabba Marav. Nosson Barabba says, "Name of Rav Kol Mitzah al Shulchan Achirim Olam Choshech Olam Choshech Badai." Anyone that is supported by someone else's table, he doesn't have his own income, so the world is dark. Shnemar noiditul alechem. He wanders around for food. Aye, where is it? Yeda or yada kinachan biyadai yom cheshach. He should know, or he knows that it's prepared for him the dark day. That's a very difficult life when someone's dependent on someone else's their meals. Rav Chizda Rav Chaya ben Chayim. Rav Chizda adds to this. He says his life isn't even a life. He knows he has no satisfaction from his life. So in the Brisa, this came in because of Rav Nosson Barabba. There's not a lot of Agadat in there. Be satisfied with a few lines here and there. There's three people, their life isn't really a life. Someone that needs to wait for his friend to eat, for him to eat. So in other words, he's dependent on this person's health. He goes to his house. No, mitzvah means he waits for the table to be served. They used to bring the table. They used to bring the tray, the meal. He was waiting for his friend to be served for him to get something to eat. It's someone that his wife rules over him. There's another person that his life isn't a life. You remember that joke with the two lines? There's two lines. Everyone that the wife controls the husband. There's one line, and the other one is a line for everyone that he controls. The husband controls the wife. So the line that the wife controls the husband is a long line, and it's one person by the husband controls the wife. He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "My wife told me to stand there." Yeah. Okay, so.
Story with
They said yesterday.
there for a reason.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's not clear. What does it mean, Mashallah Salam?
Is here more precise in its wording, or it is referring to something that prevents multiple circumstances. Plus, it is considered something.
Oh, in the pain. Yeah, 1 second. That's an interesting expression. So Yisurin, when it comes to the pain, it says someone that has pain that's ruling over his body. Now, that's a nice comment. That it's possible for someone to be in pain, but it doesn't affect his daily service of Hashem. So Mishalasalav means that he can't function. Right? Yeah, there's a lot of people that are living with pain, but they're just functioning. They're still functioning. When it causes a person not to function, that's doesn't have a life. Also, someone that only has one change of clothing. Why? Because the lice that's in the clothing is so difficult to handle. You can never. Usually, a person can get rid of the lice from this jacket or shirt or whatever, and then take off the one he's wearing and put this one on. They would actually put it over a fire, heat up the clothing so that the lice will die. But here, how's he supposed to do that? He can't. But Tanakama, why didn't the Tanakama mention this? This is very, very difficult. So after the Ma'ayin b'money, Tanakama holds that he can look at the one that he's wearing, and he can get rid of the lice while he's wearing it. And that's why they didn't mention it. Okay. Now we're back to Masechet Beitza. In Sheven Asacheres, they were talking about making kalim on Yom Tov. One of the things you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to break earthenware, and this would be used for cooking fish, because you didn't want it to burn, so you would use these pieces to put the fish on it, so it won't get too hot. The fish would cook at a lower temperature than other things. You can't cut paper to roast on it a fish. What type of paper did they have?
Thank you. Back in the day, yeah, I would hear.
Oh,
And then we feel paper.
so it's papyrus. Okay. Is that how you translate it then? It's papyrus?
Well, I mean, that's not.
What do they say in the actual?
Paper referred by the sages is not
Okay. But in Garfin Tanavik Kirayim, you're not allowed to sweep out the plaster that crumbles from the oven. You're not allowed to sweep out the oven. Abel Mechabshin, but you're allowed to press down the bottom of the oven because you have ash on the bottom. You're allowed to press it down, but there was a problem of sweeping out the plaster and stuff that collapsed. If you didn't have a proper oven, what you would do is you would make a fire and you would put two stones together. And the fire would go in between, you would put a pot on top. And so it would be, the stones would hold the pot, and the fire would be in between. Here, what he's doing is the example. It's the same idea, but the example is he's taking two barrels, he's putting them next to each other. He puts a pot on top. He's going to put a fire underneath. You're not allowed to do that because that's building. Putting the two barrels together is a sort of construction.
But that depends on your intention.
Right. In same like there bebikas, you can't support a pot with a block of wood. Why? The wood was mukta, and over here we're following the opinion that wood is only permissible to use for what it's intended to use, which is fire, and not for other things. The same would apply to a door. You can't support a door with this with the block of wood. Originally, we think that what's the pshat here, that you can't lead an animal with a stick, the Yom Tov, because the stick is muktzah. What is the stick allowed to be used for? Burning. And over here, you're using it for something else. The Gemara is going to switch that pshat. And Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says that it's permissible. The Gemara is going to think that Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon doesn't hold of muktzah. Just like his father, Rabbi Shimon, didn't hold of muktzah. This Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. The Gemara is going to reject this pshat. My timer. What's the issue over here with breaking the cheres? Because you're preparing a keli. And what that means is that you're preparing an instrument to be able to cook this fish by breaking the pottery, and then the fish was put on these shards. I guess it raised it off the heat. You're not allowed to sweep out the oven from the plaster that collapsed. Tani Rab Chia bar Yosef Kameder of Nachman. Rab Chia bar Yosef taught in front of Rab Nachman. Then it's mutter. You hear? It's mutter if you don't have any other way. Rashi says, Rabbi Yehuda. What is Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda held that on Yom Tov, besides for Eichel Nefesh, Machshirei Eichel Nefesh is also good. So what you're doing here is you're fixing the keli. You're preparing the keli, you're preparing the oven by sweeping out that broken plaster. So, and he holds that you're allowed to make an oven because Machshirei Eichel Nefesh is also permissible. Okay. The bisu to Rab Chia, Napalei Aricha B'Tanur Rabbi Yomi. Rab Chia's wife. Yeah, Rab Chia. I think it says something about Rav and his wife that she was not so kind to him. I forget. Rav as well had difficulty with his wife. Yeah, I don't remember if that's Rav or Rav. Yeah, was it Rav? I think Rav. Was it Rav that his wife would do everything the opposite? Would ask, they would say, "What would you like beans?" So she would make lentils. And if you want lentils, she would make beans. And then the son switched the instructions so that his mother would do it. And then Rav commented, your mother is being very kind lately. They said, "No, I'm switching instructions." So he says, "No, you have to be careful not to lie."
So we're really
Yeah.
really right.
Could be. Could be. Okay, anyway, over here it has everything positive. It says the brick fell in the oven on Yom Tov. Reb Chia says to her, "Chazida na rifta malai sabina." Make sure I have good bread, which means that you can fix it. Because in order for the oven to get hot, you would have to replace the brick. And he was saying that make sure that the oven's working, which means you're allowed to fix it on Yom Tov. Amarle Rava, it's Rav Yochanan. There's different versions over here. Lashame, what does it say about you? Say Rava? Rava. That's what I have in the text also, but on the bottom it says. Rava says to a servant, Tabili bar Abza. What's the Aleph? Abza. Tabili Abza, not a bar Abza. Roast for me, I guess it's like a goose, a duck. Vizdar mecharucha, and be careful that it doesn't get scorched. Now, why would it get scorched? Because they would roast it on the top of the oven. It would hang in. Now, if the ash or whatever has collapsed in the oven is still there, that would burn the part that's touching the bottom. So what he meant to tell him is that you have to sweep out the bottom, and make sure it's clean on the bottom so it doesn't scorch this goose stuff. Amali Ravina Ravashi, Amalan Ravachami Hutzel. Ravina says to Ravashi, Ravachami Hutzel told us, Demar, that the master, which means Ravashi, Sharkanli Tanura Matava. You seal off the oven on Yom Tov. Now they would seal, there must have been like a door or something or an opening, but they would plaster it up. And I'm understanding that you're plastering up the oven on Yom Tov. Now there's a problem with making plaster because that's lush. How do you make plaster? You take the dirt or whatever it's dough, it's mud. So, but you would put it with water and you would mix it and then you would smear it around to seal it off. Amalei, so Ravash responds, I don't need to make mud. We have mud on the bank of the Euphrates. Right, you can't make the but you can take it from the riverbank, and it's there already. Bahani mili me esmal. That's only if you marked off the mud that you're going to use from before Yom Tov. Otherwise, Ravina v'kit mashari. Ravina says, Ravina was in this conversation before. Ravina says that you can also use ash with water, because mixing ash with water is not really needed. You use the ash, mix in the water into the ash, and that would also create some sort of paste, but that wasn't considered kneading, and kneading with the K. You could use that to seal up the oven. Okay. You can't bring the barrels together to put the pot on top. Amrav Nachman. Nachman says, if someone is outdoors and he needs to relieve himself, he needs to use the bathroom. So they would take two rocks to sit on, and he would go to the bathroom and it would go in between the rocks. Now, apparently that's a problem on Yom Tov because there was a problem of making two barrels together and putting the pot on the top. So here he's creating some sort of like structure that something goes on the top. Here he's sitting on it. There it's a pot. Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman said that you're allowed to make this outdoor bathroom And the Mishnah says he can't bring the pots together. So Rabbah says to Rav Nachman, he asks him, you're not allowed to. On Malay, he says, Shani Asmi from the covered ayala. Over there, you're putting a roof on. The pot is going to be the roof, not the person is not considered the roof. The pot would be considered the roof. Amalei, yeah? Amalei Rabba Zuta or Ravashi. Rabba the Small says to Ravashi, is the whole problem over here that there's a hollow space underneath the roof. Is that the problem? Because I can make a solid chair on Yom Tov, according to you, without a hollow space, and then it's no oil. And so you're telling me the whole issue is the oil. So am I allowed to build up a chair, the itztaba, some sort of platform, solid with no space underneath it? Amalei, he says, no, that's even worse. Hasam binyan keva asher Torah. Anything permanent is biblically forbidden. You can't build anything permanent. Binyan arai lo asher Torah. Anything temporary is not biblically forbidden. But because Rabbanan al binyan arai mishum binyan keva, but there's a decree that you're not allowed to make a temporary structure because you're not allowed to make a permanent structure. And here, because of the honor, covered abrias, the person should be able to use the bathroom properly. So they didn't make a gzeira on a temporary structure, but they did make a gzeira on a temporary structure for cooking. So, yeah, that's what comes out of it. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, "Hi medursa milmayla lamata shari milmata lamayla asi." The way they would make a fire, they would build it. They would have blocks of wood that would go on the side, and then they would put wood on top, and they would build it like a teepee sort of thing. Now, if there's walls with the roof, that's how you're doing it, and that's a problem on Yom Tov. On Shabbos, you can't make a fire anyway, but on Yom Tov, that you're allowed to make a fire, there's a concern about the way you build the fire. It says someone holds the top, and then they put the sides in, but not to put the sides down. And then, so if you build it from the top downwards, which means someone's holding the top in place, and then that's acceptable. But from bottom up, that's like construction, and that's, you have to basically make a shina. Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on with this egg. Rashi's telling me that you're putting the egg on top of a keli. That means that's a lid. Kadera, I understand what you're doing. You're putting the pot on top of something that's going underneath, on the top of like a tripod. So what you do is you would hold the pot, and then you put the things on the side from underneath, you fit them in. The same you could do with the bed. Now, all of these is because you're going to be putting something underneath it. A regular bed wouldn't be a problem, but here you're making a bed, so you have like some sort of mat or some sort of mat, or however it is, and then you put the legs in underneath it. So you hold the bed in place. And the same thing with those barrels that we said before. No, the chavis over here is when you're piling barrels up because of storage. So you would put 2 barrels on the bottom and 1 on top. Actually, what you should really do is you should hold the one on top and put the barrels from underneath. Maskana before? Yeah. Similar to an oil. Yeah. What it sounds like from this Gemara, from Rav Yehuda, is that really I should be allowed to do what it says in the Mishnah by just bringing the pot first. I don't know if that's the maskana. I mean, that's clearly what it sounds like. Bring the pot first and then put the barrels in. Yeah. That is Rav Yehuda saying that the Mishnah was only saying it in a usual way. Okay. Now it says, you can't support the pot with a block of wood, and the same thing applies to a door. Now it says the same thing as with the door. We said that the issue was muktzah of the wood. Now the way the Gemara understands this right now is that it sounds like you can't support the pot with a block of wood, and you can't use a door to support the pot. Now the Gemara is very surprised. You're going to put a pot on a door. That's not like supportive. The door is like standing straight. What it really means is that you can't use the block of wood to support the door. If the door, I don't know exactly what the situation was, but you could use a block to lift it up or something to support it. Now that block of wood was meant for only for fuel, right? And so therefore it's muktzah to use the block of wood for anything else. Taner Rabbanan. So in a Brayse saying Simchnes der bebikas b'china delas. It's following the opinion that says that wood is only there for fuel, for burning, and you can't use it for anything else. Reb Shimon Mater. Reb Shimon says, no, you're allowed to. Shimon, remember, it doesn't hold the muktzah. So there is no such thing as designating it for. Reb Shimon's opinion is that I'm going to use it for whatever needs come up. It's not muktzah. It's whatever needs come up, I can use it for. Now it says, you can't lead an animal with a stick. You can't make it go with the stick on Yom Tov. And Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says you're allowed. We thought that this was also. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says that the stick would follow his father's view that the stick could be used for anything. Reb Shimon is Reb Shimon bar Yochai. And the Tanakama holds like Rabbi Yehuda that there's muktzah. It says, Leimer Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon kavua sfira lei d'lesle muktzah. Let us say that he follows his father's view, doesn't hold the muktzah.
Why?
Because the stick is only meant for firewood.
No, the stick is to move the animal to get it to come so that you can check it,
Right.
so that you can cook it and eat it.
Yeah.
Right? The stick isn't just meant for fire.
Yeah. So this opinion is saying that usually a stick is meant for firewood. You may have other uses for it, but unless you designate it for those uses, you can't use it for that. If you had designated, it would be different. Yeah. Yeah. So then, instead of calling it a makal, we would have called it a darban or something. They have other names for a prodder. The Gemara says, "Loi." Actually, not. Actually, Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon does not necessarily hold up his father. And B'ha'afilu Rabbi Shimon Maida, Mishum Demesik Mandaz Lachinka. Over here, the problem with using a stick is that it looks like you're prodding it to go to the marketplace. That's how they would walk the animals in the street. No, it was a prod. They would poke it to get it to go, and that's how they would sell it, and that would be a weekday activity. So you can't use a stick to lead an animal, but that's a weekday. It looks like it's going to the market. It doesn't have to do with muktzah. Yeah. Now, chinga means a circle. Now, the marketplace is called a chinga because they would have stores in a circle, and the old-fashioned marketplace, and the crowd would come into the center. Everyone would, bustling. From this store, that's booths. Okay. Yeah, Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon is probably the most interesting, most colorful of all the Tannaim. Remember, he was a Roman police. They told him, "Chaimitz ben Yayin, what are you doing? You're arresting Jewish people." He said, "No, I'm taking the bad away from the good or something. I'm taking the thorns out of the vineyard." It was after it was in the cave. And then the sages didn't allow him to be buried or something. It was in the attic. In the beginning of Beitza Daf, I think it is. Very interesting story. I mean, this would be a novel. Okay. And then Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says if there's only two people in the world that are B'nai Aliyah, it would be me and you. So it was one of the greats. Okay. Now we're up to Chizra. This is a bamboo stick. It's probably bamboo, but it's some sort of stick that could be used as a skewer. You're going to use it to roast. So Naftali is saying about that a stick is used for food because prodding the animal is for food. Now it's really used for food because I'm using it as a skewer. So Rav Nachman says no, it's not used for direct fuel. A stick is meant to be burnt. Rav Shesha says no, you're allowed to use it. If the stick is still moist, that it really can't be used as fuel, so everyone agrees that it's muktzah. But what if it's dry? So it could be used as fuel. Manda asar, so Rav Nachman that says that you can't use it. He says wood is meant to be burnt. Manda shari amalach, and the one that says that it's mutter, he says mali litzis by mali litzis begachlasi. He says, what's the difference? It's for food. What's the difference if I roast with it or I roast with it? It depends on what you're using it for. Using it for as fuel or as a stick to hold it. Okay, that would be if we say the machlekes Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes is about a dry stick that could be used for fuel. According to this way, everyone agrees that if it's moist, you can't use it at all. You can't use it. It's not ready for fuel, and you can't use it as a skewer. Some say that even Rav Nachman would agree that you could use it as a skewer if it's dry. The whole machlekes is only when it's wet. Manda asar, the one that says that it's forbidden, he says you can't use it for roasting, so therefore it's muktzah. So therefore you can't use it as a skewer either. Manda shari amalach, I know I can't really use it as a small fire, but if I throw it into a large fire, then it will dry out, and then it will be good. It will be able to be used for wood. It will help. Behilchasan halach is yabesh teshari retiv to asa. Halach is that a dry one would be permissible, and to use as a skewer, you could take a piece of wood and use it as a skewer, and if it's wet, it's asa. You have to see this Rashi. Rashi Behilchasan. Yeah, it's not going to be in your Gemara, but if you turn to the beginning, Rashi says, Hachilchasa. You see that? Let's see the Rashi. It's towards the bottom of the Gemara, but it's in the center of the page of Rashi. It says, Hachilchasa liba demandis leimukta ikba. When the Gemara says Hilchasa, it's the halacha according to one opinion. According to the opinion that says that there's an issue of muktzah, turns out you're allowed to use a dry piece of wood, even though muktzah is a problem, but you're allowed to use a dry piece of wood to roast as a skewer. Avalanan, but we paskin Reb Shimon Svirala. We paskin like Reb Shimon, not like Reb Yehuda. Bein b'muktzah, we paskin for muktzah. Bein b'davar she'einu miskaven, or something einu miskaven. Einu miskaven is a malacha on Shabbos that you don't really mean to do. You open up the refrigerator and the light goes on. I didn't want to turn on the light. That's obsecration because it always goes on. But if there was something that walking on the grass, I didn't intend to pull out any grass. I was just walking and it happened to catch in my laces or something. It got pulled out. I was saying, it's not a problem. Rabbi Yehuda, we also paskin like Rabbi Yehuda b'machshirei yoichel nefesh. You hear? You're allowed to make a keli to be able to make food. Machshirei yoichel, not just yoichel nefesh. Machshirei yoichel nefesh. B'kulu shari, everything is really permissible. Bein chesra, whether the skewer, bein smichas kederis, you're allowed to support the pots. B'kavas chavias, you're even allowed to bring the barrels close together. Umedursa, you're allowed to set up that fire. Ukadera, and the pots, allowed to build it up. Now, I didn't know that had to do with Well, it's not muktzah. What's the worst that it could be is that you prepared a keli for Eichel Nefesh. And that's machshir Eichel Nefesh. That's Rabbi Yehuda allows. B'chol ha'merim she'asru aseilu l'mayla talmidei the Rav havu v'Rav savla k'Rabbi Yehuda b'muktzah v'anan kaimlan k'Rab Shimon. You're going to quote me a lot of Gemaras. All of those Amiram were students of Rav. But we don't go like that. We follow Reb Shimon's opinion, and Muktzah is permissible in Rabbi Yehuda Machshir Nefesh. Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's Rashi.
Says it is permissible. For example, make a keli or make like a temporary stuff.
Right, and that's why he's allowing. That's what Rashi's asking. The actual halacha, I don't know, but Rashi's telling us what he holds.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to Darash. Darash Rava. Rava said, by the way, Rashi usually doesn't tell us the halacha. It's very rare. We have it in Hilchos Shabbos. He'll tell us the halacha. And he'll tell us the halacha in Chulin. We have sometimes Rashi says Hilchos. And we have it here. Someone told me, Rabbi Janowski, from Yeshiva Elementary, he told me that he was in, maybe it was Rabbi Riverman's house or Rabbi Weinberg's house, but one of the Rosh Hashivas in Israel. He had Kabbalah Svar. I said, what is this? It's Kabbalah Svar. He said, oh, it's very interesting. I said, what's so interesting? So he says like this. He says, it says in the Sefer that Rashi is a Gilgal of Rav, and Shmuel is a Gilgal of the Rambam. I'm sorry, the Rambam is a Gilgal of Shmuel. Rashi and the Rambam. Rashi is a Gilgal of Rav. Shmuel is a Gilgal. The Rambam is a Gilgal of Shmuel. So therefore, the halacha is like Shmuel by Dini Mamonis, right? Halacha ka Shmuel by Dini. Halacha ka Rav by Yisuri in all ritual law. Halacha is like Rav. Halacha is like Shmuel in all monetary law. So therefore, the Shulchan Aruch, Choshen Mishpat, is basically word for word from the Rambam in monetary law. So that's the halacha. The Rambam's halacha, Choshen Mishpat, is very, concrete. It's almost the final law. And Rashi only says v'hilchasa in ritual laws. In Chulin, in Shabbos, and in Beya, when it comes out to those few places where we have Rashi's v'hilchasa, it's not in Dini Mam, it's not in Bava Metzia. It's in okay. Right. Right.
There were two generations, later.
Right. Right. This was actually a place before we had this discussion. Shmuel halacha l'maisa l'ashminan. This was we discussed this in this place. Okay. Darash Rava isha leitichanes ledira itzim little mem ud. An ud is it's a stick that's used to stoke the coals. Now she's a woman that's going to be working with the fire to cook. She can't take this piece of wood because this is a tool. But and then if she has one of these woods, she can't throw it into the fire if it broke. A poker. Okay. If it firebrand. What is a firebrand? Okay. Let's I don't know what it is either. But it's oh, so it must be the thing that they used to poke the wood around. So you would be allowed to burn a keli, but you can't burn a broken keli. Because when Yom Tov came in, this was meant for something else. Why are you allowed to burn a keli when Yom Tov came in? but at least on Yom Tov it had a use. Now you're giving it a. Yeah, why did we say this? Seeking the kalim. Seeking the kalim because it's not muktzah, but shivrei kalim that broke on Yom Tov have a problem because right now it doesn't have a function. You're going to tell me, well, it does have a function. Its function is firewood. That wasn't its function when Yom Tov came in. So shivrei kalim, broken kalim, have a problem from both sides. Like it's not a keli anymore, and I also can't use it for firewood. So the Gemara says, "L'meimra." Is this to say the Rava Rabbi Yehuda Sfira this like muktzah? That Rava holds of muktzah, v'amalei Rava l'shami tavli bar avza v'shadi me'el l'shunra. Rava doesn't hold of muktzah because Rava says he told his servant, he said, roast for me a bar avza, a duck or a goose, and throw the innards to the cat. Now, the innards to the cat, that wasn't designated for cat food. If he holds of muktzah, then he wouldn't be allowed to give it to the cat. It was meant for human food. The Gemara says, "Hasan kivin the misarchi, the misrachi, meyasmal daiti loving." Then he must have had intention for it already yesterday. He knows that it's going to be to spoil or to smell. So therefore, this is considered that it was intentional for that as well. But in other words, Rava could really hold of muktzah, and he would still give this to the cat because this was intended for original. Now, today he didn't need it. He was going to use it for today he had food, so he didn't need it now. He was just going to leave it. So it must be that he understood that he wouldn't need it, and that the insides, if he doesn't need it, it's going to go to the cat. Okay, let's leave it up here.